Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Nahmadu wa nusalli ala Rasulil Kareem. Amma ba'd. So, as I'm sure many of us, we're probably aware that the the masjid in Turkey, that masjid which is known as the Hagia Sophia, in the time of Mustafa Ataturk, this masjid, Hagia Sophia, it was converted to a museum. And Alhamdulillah, recently the decision was made where the Turkish courts, they reverted the Hagia Sophia from museum to a masjid. And of course, the social media, it gives everyone a voice. I mean, this is what social media is all about. That whether you want someone's opinion or you want to listen to someone's opinion, everybody's giving their 2 cents. And obviously, you always have people who are sympathetic towards Christians, and they'll say certain things like, I came across a post where this one guy says that, oh, how am I going to meet my Christian friend now when I know that this masjid in this museum in Turkey has been converted to a masjid again? How am I going to talk to him? How am I going to be neighborly to him? How am I going to interact with them as if it's so hard? So people are saying, just absurd things, that this was a bad decision that was made on part of the Muslims, and that shouldn't have been the case. It should have remained a museum, and there was no need for it to become a masjid. Well, if you're feeling that way, my question to you is that why don't you have this kind of sympathy when it comes to Cordoba Masjid in Spain? If you're sympathetic to your Christian friend, then you should be sympathetic to the masjid in Cordoba, right, in Spain. And not just that masjid, but the thousands of masjids that were masjids at one time, and then after the Inquisition, those masjids became cathedrals. All of them became cathedrals. So you don't see Muslims, crying about that right now at this point, that woe to us and why did this happen, and we're not lamenting over it. I mean, it happened, so it happened, right? The point is that Muslims, they always feel that if they're doing something from a position of strength, it has to be wrong, right? And this is just unfortunately how certain Muslims are, where they feel that we're doing this and it should not have been done. But why the double standards? I mean, okay, if you feel this way, then you should feel this way about the masjid in Cordoba. What about in India, Babri Masjid, the masjid that's attributed towards Sultan Babur, the first Mughal king? When this masjid, it was demolished to make way for a Hindu temple, I mean, yes, there was a hue and there was an uproar around the Muslim ummah, but why aren't you crying about that? So this is, I mean, these kind of, I mean, this issue, that kind of issue, where we need to feel ashamed about it, and we need to say that, how am I going to interact with people who I have known for a very long time, who are Christians, who are born Christians? They're my neighbors, or I go and do missionary, not missionary work, but I go and help out at their church, stuff like that. So again, it's double standards, and as Muslims, we should not feel ashamed in the slightest when it comes to this monumental decision the Turkish courts made. And by the way, the background of why they made this decision to begin with, when Sultan Muhammad, he conquered Constantinople. He was 21 years. He was 21 years old, and he single-handedly ended the Byzantine Empire. This man, at the age of 21, ended the Byzantine Empire in 1453. So, I mean, this is just an accomplishment which you and I, we can't even imagine what kind of accomplishment this was for the Muslims. And when he conquered Constantinople, he purchased the property of the Hagia Sophia from his personal wealth, and before converting it to a masjid. So first he purchased it with his wealth, then converted it into a masjid. The details of this transaction, they're still stored in Turkish museums, and photos are available online. It's not like this is a mystery or anything. Photos are available online. This is the main reason why the Turkish court ordered Hagia Sophia to be reconverted to a masjid, because it was always a masjid. Once something has been converted to a masjid, that's it. It's game over. It's going to be a masjid until the day of Qiyamah. You can't change it. Yes, I mean, when it comes to Cordoba Masjid, when it comes to Babri Masjid, and the thousands of other masajid, that have been converted into churches, it's not like this has not happened. Again, it happened. Our belief is that, if we have the chance to convert it back to a masjid without any bloodshed, okay, alhamdulillah, that's no problem. But if you go, at least at Hagia Sophia, they're letting in visitors, they're letting in tourists who happen to be Christians, who happen to be people from other faiths. Similarly, on the flip side, when Muslims, when they visit Spain, do they allow any Muslim to pray 2 rakats? Has that ever been allowed at the Cordoba Masjid? In remembrance, to commemorate that this was a masjid. If you try to offer 2 rakats, from what I know and from what I have heard firsthand from people who have visited the place and who had this desire to offer 2 rakat salat, just to commemorate the masjid, to honor the masjid, tahiyatul masjid. This is from the sunnah, to honor the masjid. These are 2 units of prayer to honor the masjid. You have the security guards there. They're going to shoo you out, and they're not going to allow you to pray over there. And that's very much different than what the Hagia Sophia continues to allow tourists. I mean, tourists come in, they go over there, they look at pictures and stuff. The pictures of Hagia Sophia, they're still there. So it's not like Sultan Muhammad, he took down the pictures and he took down, the salient features of Christianity, just the place where he had them covered up. He didn't have them desecrated, covered up. And just one area is for the Jama'ah area, is for the congregation area, and another area is for women. But I mean, he was sympathetic, to the point where, subhanallah, this man, he never desecrated any of the salient features of Christianity. Those pictures, they still exist. The pictures are still there. All of the salient features are still there. He never, exhumed any graves or anything along those lines. So he had the foresight when he conquered Constantinople. He had the foresight to purchase the property with his own wealth, and then he made it into a masjid. And a masjid is what? It's waqf. It's waqf. It's an endowment till the day of Qiyamah. And an endowment is something that benefits everyone. It can't be something that is a waqf. And if it's specified for a specific use, it can't be changed. So the main reason why the court ordered Hagia Sophia to be reconverted to a masjid is this, that it's a waqf. There's a waqf deed that's associated with Hagia Sophia. So the credit really goes to Sultan Muhammad, the conqueror of Constantinople, for purchasing the church and then creating a waqf, an endowment. So if it wasn't for his wisdom, Ataturk's decision would not have been made. It would not have been possible to legally overturn the decision that he made, that it should, this is a museum now. So this, Sultan Muhammad's wisdom, it conquered Kemal Ataturk. And these are just facts. That the foresight that he showed, 500 years ago, it conquered the design of Kemal Ataturk. And if we happen to pray at Sophia, remember Sultan Muhammad, that it's because of him that we can now offer prayers at Hagia Sophia, and no one can say anything about it. Another thing that strikes me as odd is, why is it that always it's Muslims that have to abide by the entire world's decision? This is something that I have trouble understanding. That it seems like whenever there are certain conditions that countries need to abide by, the receiving end has always been Muslims. That Muslims have to abide by the decisions of these Western countries. Well, why don't you point fingers at yourself first? And why don't the Western countries point fingers at themselves instead of pointing fingers at Muslim countries and being worried about them? I'm sure Muslim countries, they can handle their stuff, right? Just like Western countries, they can handle their stuff. Muslim countries too can handle their stuff. There's no need for people to point fingers at Muslim countries. So when Muslims on social media, when they start saying, "Oh, you know what? I'm saddened that it has been converted into a masjid," well, don't be saddened. What is the reason that you're sad and you're lamenting that something that was made into a masjid? It was made into a masjid. It was an endowment, and this endowment was created by Sultan Muhammad. This endowment has now been made. This endowment was a masjid, and it's become a masjid once again. So this is not a big deal where we need to express our thoughts on social media, that this is a bad thing, this is not a good thing, and how are we going to speak to Christians, and we should feel ashamed about this. There's nothing to feel ashamed of, right? If you're going to be ashamed about, then you should feel ashamed about the masjid in Cordoba, feel ashamed about the thousands of masjids that have become cathedrals in present day Spain and Portugal and Sicily. These are all areas where there were at one time thousands of masajid. Thousands of masajid existed in Spain, in Portugal, in Sicily. So Muslims are not crying boo and woe to us, and why has this happened? And are Christians talking about that? How are we going to face the Muslims? Are they speaking about this? No, they're not, because they honestly couldn't care. So similarly, Muslims should not feel any kind of shame. They don't need to feel any kind of remorse. This was a decision that Sultan Muhammad made more than 500 years ago. He purchased the property, right, from the people who were overseeing the Hagia Sophia, and he made it into a waqf. This is what a masjid is. A masjid is a waqf. It's a public endowment, right? So, and in those days, the Ottomans, what they would do with waqf is that they would add so many things to the waqf. They would add soup kitchens, they would add hospitals, they would add libraries. So it's not like what you and I understand a masjid to be, that this is the place where you offer the prayer and that's it, you go home. No. In those days, they made sure that there was a place for guests to sleep. They made sure that travelers, weary travelers, they had a travel lodge. They had a soup kitchen that was serving the poor people, the destitute people. They had a hospital. They had a library, and this library was available for everybody, not just Muslims. So even now, throughout Turkey, people who wish to um, study history, or they want access to specific manuscripts, they're allowed to go in. It doesn't matter if you're Muslim or non-Muslim. They're allowed to go in. They can go in. There's no issue with that. And another thing that comes to mind is that Masjid Nabwi itself hosted a delegation of Christians, and the Prophet ﷺ allowed them to do their worship in Masjid Nabwi. This is in Zad al-Ma'ad. I'm not making this up. This is in Zad al-Ma'ad, written by Ibn al-Qayyim Jawziyah. I have that book right over here. It's behind me. So in there, I even marked the place. So in there, the Prophet ﷺ, there is a hadith where a Christian delegation came to Masjid Nabwi, and it was time for their prayer. So they faced their Qibla and they offered their prayer, whatever their prayer was. And the Prophet ﷺ didn't say that, oh yeah, you know what, this is not permissible. This is there's a problem with this. So again, Muslims have always been very accommodating when it comes to other faiths. This has always been the case. Muslims have always been accommodating to Christians, to Jewish people, to people of other faiths. This is a fact. I mean, history is a test. History. This is what history tells us. Right? History is a testament to what I'm saying. The claim that I'm making right now, that Muslims have always been accommodating, illa masha'Allah. The Muslims who have not been accommodating, this is not the standard. But majority of the time, the Muslims have always been accommodating when it comes to people of other faiths. I mean, look at Salahuddin Ayyubi. After 100 years, he recaptured Jerusalem. And prior to that, how did the Christian crusaders, how did they conquer Jerusalem? I mean, they killed so many people. They killed so many Muslims. Did the Muslims, after 100 years, respond in kind? No, they didn't. Did Sultan Salahuddin Ayyubi, did he respond in kind? No, absolutely not. He didn't maim or massacre and just, destroy and desecrate the salient features of Christianity. He didn't do that. He didn't do that. Although, was he within his right to do that? Absolutely. But did he do that? No. So the Islam that I practice is the Islam of Salahuddin Ayyubi, where he didn't take revenge from the Christians who were living there at the time. He didn't take revenge by maiming and massacring and by kicking them out. No. He gave them time. He gave them time, and he told them, take whatever you can. You have 3 days. And they were allowed to. They were allowed to leave peacefully and with honor. Did they give that when the Crusaders did whatever they did? Did they give that opportunity to Muslims? No, they didn't. I mean, they killed so many Muslims. It comes in historical reports that the blood, it reached their knees, or the blood reached the knees of their horses. It's probably an exaggeration, but I mean, this is what historical reports say. And sometimes historical reports are exaggerated. But the point is, they did kill Muslims. And Salahuddin, he didn't respond in kind. He didn't respond by maiming and massacring and by committing, mass genocide of the people over there. No, he didn't do that. So Sultan Muhammad, when he conquered Constantinople, again, there was no maiming and massacring. He never did anything like that. So once the wall fell, that's it. They surrendered, and game over after that. So alhamdulillah, he had the foresight to purchase the place. He purchased it with his own money, right? This was money that he himself earned. So, and after purchasing it, he made it waqf for the Muslims. He made it an endowment for the Muslims. So now the Muslims, they can go there, they can offer their salat there. And once upon a time, that was not the case. Once the secular reforms of Kemal Ataturk, when they were put in place in 1924 or whenever, it was decided the Hagia Sophia should be converted into a museum. They didn't pay any heed to what Sultan Muhammad did. No, they ignored everything. And the committee of reform and progress, this was the committee that they came up with, reform and progress. They're like, you know what, we need to make it into a museum because 1,000 years it was built 1,000 years ago by the emperor Justinian. That was the emperor's name. And we need to keep it. We need to keep it that way. We need to keep it a church. No, this was first and foremost. Constantinople was conquered by Sultan Muhammad. It was conquered by the Muslims, which means that it was permissible for the Muslims to do that. It was permissible for the Muslims to, even without purchasing that place, it was permissible for them to make it into a masjid. There was nothing wrong with it. But Sultan Muhammad, he purchased it and he made it waqf for the Muslims. So again, to those Muslims who are on social media, Twitter, Facebook, God knows what else, what other social platforms are out there, if they're saying that, how am I going to, face my Christian neighbor? Well, you should be thinking about Cordoba Masjid, or you should be thinking about your neighbor, that how is your neighbor going to face you, and respond to your question that, what about Cordoba Masjid? I mean, Masjid al-Nabawi, it's patterned. The structure, the architecture of Masjid al-Nabawi, it's based on Masjid Qurtuba, the masjid in Cordoba, which has been converted into a cathedral. And that's just one masjid. There are thousands of masjid. Remember that present day Spain and Portugal it had a Muslim population for approximately 8 centuries. So imagine the number of masajid that must have been built during this time. Each and every single one of those masjids, they were converted into cathedrals. So to the Muslims, I ask them very simple question, that if this is what you're thinking, then isn't it fair that your Christian neighbor should be thinking the same thing about Spain and Portugal? Or if you have a Hindu, or if you have a non-Muslim neighbor, and he asks that, what do you think about this decision of what happened in Turkey? Well, you respond by saying that, well, what do I think? What do you think about the Hindus converting a masjid into a mandir? Babri Masjid was made into a mandir. It's made into a mandir for Ram. So what do you think about that? Or what do you think about Cordoba Masjid converted into a cathedral, and the thousands of other masajid that have been converted into cathedrals? What do you think about that? And then once whatever response he gives, that response should be valid for Hagia Sophia as well. That response will be valid for Hagia Sophia as well. We don't need to feel, as Muslims, we don't need to feel ashamed of this decision. We should be happy. We should be proud. It was a museum. I'm sure people can still go in. They allow non-Muslims to come into Sultan Ahmed Masjid. They're happy to go. They follow the guidelines. They follow whatever conditions they have placed. wearing the hijab and dressing modestly. I mean, these are pieces of history. We don't need to feel ashamed. So they allow non-Muslim women to come in. That, okay, yes, take a look at our masjid, take a look at our architecture. This is our history. This is the legacy that our ancestors have left behind. So those masajid, those are very well maintained masajid. Those masjids in Turkey, in Istanbul, in Bursa, in Konya Sharif, in Şanlıurfa, in Antalya, in where else? In Cappadocia. All of these areas, the masajid, they are very well maintained. I mean, these people are proud of their legacy. So as Muslims, we should feel proud that we're part of this. We're part of this legacy. SubhanAllah, this is just amazing. That those masajid to this day, they're still standing. People still offer their salawat over there, albeit not as much as we would like, but they're still offering salawat over there. And on Jumu'ah, usually people go to Sultan Ahmed Masjid. So for the daily prayers, it's not as full. But if you go for the daily prayers at Sultan Muhammad Fatih Masjid, that place is always jam-packed all the time. Or the Sulaimaniya Masjid, that place is jam-packed for every single prayer. This is a tourist area. People judge that, oh yeah, the masjid is not full. So why convert it to a masjid to begin with? Well, it's not full because this is primarily a tourist area now. But it's converted into a masjid. People will start offering salat there. I mean, you have a whole bunch of masjids on that one street has at least 15, 20 masjids. Just that one street. I think that's Divan Yulu Street or something, where the tram runs. You have 10, 15, if not more masjids. I mean, obviously, you're not going to have, full masjid all the time. And again, it's a tourist area. And, if you're trying to say that, okay, well, they should just populate the other masajid. Uh, why? Why does it have to be only the other masajid? Why can't it be Hagia Sophia as well? What's wrong with it? What's wrong if people come, even if it's 10 people who are coming for salat? What is the big deal? So alhamdulillah, I think it's a good decision that was made by the Turkish courts. As for the non-Muslims who are condemning Turkey and who are pointing fingers at them, Muslims, they should not feel guilty at all. And I think Muslims need to start asking the question: is that why are you trying to impose your values on us? This is a problem. This has become a problem that other countries, Western countries, leaders, they impose their own values on Muslim countries. I think Muslim leaders and Muslims should feel proud, and they should respond in kind that, don't impose your values on us. We don't impose our values on you. So why are you imposing your values on us? So these are just some thoughts that I had about, this decision, where, the Turkish High Court, they decided to revert the Hagia Sophia from museum to masjid. Alhamdulillah, I think it's a good decision. We can offer our salawat over there. I'm not sure, at one time people were paying to get in to look at the historical, artifacts that are still there. There must be something in place as far as, the historical artifacts. They might have two entrances. I don't know, but I'm sure they're not charging an entry fee to offer prayers or anything over there. Okay, continuing on. Wearing a wig due to hair loss, as long as the wig is not human hair, it's permissible. There is nothing wrong with wearing a wig due to hair loss. Okay, is it permissible that as a student I use the notes from someone else while I'm studying? There's nothing wrong with this as long as it's not considered academic dishonesty. So academic dishonesty is when you plagiarize someone else's work. But if you're using someone else's notes, the guy takes good notes, and because of his diligent note taking, you're in a better position as far as your classes are concerned, then there is no issue using someone else's notes, as long as they're not considered as plagiarizing someone else's work or academic dishonesty by using someone else's work. It's fine to use someone else's notes. Okay, can I do nafil qurbani with the intention to reward multiple people? Absolutely, you can. So nafil qurbani, this was the sunnah of the Sahaba as well, that they would do qurbani for themselves, and they would do nafil qurbani as well. So they would do nafil qurbani where they would include the Prophet ﷺ and the Ahl Bayt. So they would include the Prophet ﷺ and the family of the Prophet ﷺ. So nafil qurbani, it's fine. You can include how many people you want in nafil qurbani. There is no restriction. Yes, qurbani itself is fard upon each and every mature, sane Muslim. It's fard upon each and every mature, sane Muslim. So there's few conditions over here. The Muslim has to be mature, has to be sane, and he has to have, of course, the quantum of nisab. So the quantum of nisab for zakat, this is what the Muslim should have in his or her possession. If he has that on the day of qurbani, then qurbani is obligatory. Qurbani has to be done. So it's wajib upon each and every individual who is a Muslim, who is mature, who is sane, and who has the quantum of nisab. Who has the quantum of nisab. And I've mentioned that the nisab amount is 87 grams of gold, or its equivalent in cash. So if a person has that, 87 grams of gold or its equivalent in cash, which works out to be like $5,000 or something, or close to $5,000, qurbani becomes wajib. Qurbani becomes fard. So, of course, you're going to deduct liabilities and stuff. So if a person has like $5,000, but his, liabilities are $10,000, so he's in the negative. So qurbani is not wajib in that case. Okay. If my parents pass away and they have loans, so am I obligated to take care of them? So when the parents pass away, so there's two things over here: money that is owed to the parents, in which case these are receivables and people have an obligation to give that. And then there are liabilities, loans that your parents may have taken, in which case this will be paid from the estate. It will be paid from the estate. So after anybody dies, right, there's a few rules over here. Number one, from that person's estate, the janaza, everything related to the janaza, this is going to be paid by the estate of the person who has died. Right? After that, debts will be fulfilled. So if that person has any debts, outstanding debts, then those debts need to be taken care of. After the debts, you have the last thing, and that is distribution amongst the heirs. So you have to identify who are the heirs of that person, and the Quran has categorized the heirs. So it's very simple. You simply need to explain to the scholar that this such and such person is survived by something difficult, and this is something that we should pay close attention to. We should pay close attention to mirath, and to make sure that when somebody dies, when someone passes away, we need to ensure that that person's wealth is correctly distributed. Otherwise, moving forward, there's going to be a lot of argument. There's going to be a lot of fights between the siblings and the immediate heirs of the family. I've seen many families. I've been an imam for approximately 15 years now. I've seen many families that they have devolved into just infighting amongst themselves because the mirath, the inheritance, was not correctly distributed. So we need to make sure that when someone passes away, that their inheritance is correctly distributed. Otherwise, there's going to be problems moving forward. I mean, families have been, they've been fractured for years simply because the mirath, it was not properly distributed upon that person's death. Okay. How does a muqim praying behind a musafir complete his prayer? So somebody who's a muqim, right, and he has to do 4 rakats, obviously in the 2 rakat and 3 rakat prayer, not an issue. But a 4 rakat prayer, such as if a muqim, someone who is in his hometown, he's praying behind a musafir, someone who's a traveler. So dhuhr, asr, or dhuhr, asr, and isha. So obviously the musafir, he does 2 rakats. Right? The musafir, he does 2 rakats. So 2 rakats for dhuhr, 2 rakats for asr, 2 rakats for isha. So the muqim, the one who's in his hometown praying behind a musafir, once the musafir says salam, then the muqim simply gets up and he offers his salat. Now, there's one thing over here, right, which is specific to the Hanafi school. Okay, and that is that a muqim, the person who is in his hometown, and he has to do those 2 units, he has 2 units left, 2 rakats left, he's not going to read anything. No Surah Fatiha, nothing. He's just going to go down, complete his salat normal, just stand up silent, and that's it. If he wants to read, that's fine, but he doesn't have to. He doesn't have to read Surah Fatiha. He doesn't have to read anything. And he completes the salat. Of course, this is just for the qira'ah, just for the recitation when a person is standing. In ruku and sujood, obviously you're going to read. When you're sitting, obviously you're going to read, at-tahiyyat and sending durood, salawat and salam upon the Prophet ﷺ and the dua. But this is how a muqim, according to the Hanafi school, this is how he will complete his prayer if he prays behind a musafir. Do I need to pay zakat on unpaid mahar? Okay, so simple answer, no, you don't. If there is outstanding mahar your husband owes you, right? So first and foremost, husband should pay mahar. I mean, this is haqq, right? This is what the Quran has stated, that the husband should and is obligatory, it's fard for the husband to pay mahar to the wife. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about this at length in the Quran in quite a number of places. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the huquq and the rights of women, specifically the mahar. So there's two types of mahar. One is mahar mu'ajjal, the immediate mahar, which is given at the time of nikah. So let's say, let's paint a scenario over here. Let's say a mahar was established at $2,000, right? Now, the husband at the time doesn't have $2,000. So it's mustahab, it's desirable to give a portion of that. Instead of $2,000, $500 at the time of marriage. So now he has $1,500 outstanding left. Now, does the wife need to pay zakat on that amount? Because this is a debt, right? It's a debt. So according to the Hanafi school, this is considered a weak debt. Hence, there's no zakat on it. Same thing with miras. With if somebody follows up, let me just answer this right now. Someone's parents died, and distribution has not yet taken place. So does that person need to pay zakat on the wealth that is going to be coming in his possession? No, he doesn't. Again, it's a weak debt. So this is considered a weak debt. There's no zakat on it. So if there is balance, an unpaid balance of mahar, even after 5-10 years, let's say, that 1,500 was not given for 5-10 years. There's no zakat on that 1,500 for, 5 to 10 years or however much. Although I would advise the husband, pay the wife, for God's sake. That's their right. That is their haqq. And, it's not something that should be forgotten. There's going to be accountability on the day of Qiyamah. Husband should pay the complete mahar. If in the future, the wife feels and says that, okay, you know what, it's okay. You don't need to pay me. You've already purchased, gold bars for me and diamonds and, all of this other stuff. So I'm good. You don't need to pay me. So that should come from her, and it should come from her own heart. I mean, there shouldn't be any kind of, coercion or bribery or anything along those lines. Okay, is it permissible for me to take marijuana for my anxieties? Yeah, it's permissible. Medicinal marijuana is okay. I think I've answered this before. So medicinal marijuana, it's good as long as a person doesn't become like that Cheech and Chong who are constantly smoking marijuana, and they're trying to be, and they're just smoking and they're doing ridiculous things. And I think they've made a TV show out of just being ridiculous and absurd. So medicinal marijuana with in small quantities, as long as for the sake of medicine, it's fine. It's similar to opium. So in Afghanistan, they use opium as medicine. There's nothing wrong with that if it's used in small quantities. But obviously, if you process it further, it becomes heroin, and that's when it becomes haram. So if marijuana is used for medical purposes, there's nothing wrong with it. Absolutely nothing wrong with this. Is medicine. But if it's used for recreation, then we have a problem, because that person is going to get high, and he's going to be doing things that he should not be doing. So these are all the questions I have this week. Are there any further questions, or what we have, or something we have not covered. If there are questions, now is the time to ask. We'll wait. So today we answered, we talked about the decision to revert Aya Sophia from a museum to a masjid, wearing a wig due to hair loss, permissible as long as not hair from human beings, student using notes from someone else in university, nafal qurbani with intention to reward multiple people, the loans of parents, muqim praying behind musafir, zakat on unpaid mahar, and medicinal marijuana. So far, this is what we have covered. If there are follow-up questions to these questions that I answered, by all means, write it down, let me know. If not, and there are other questions, then that too is fine. Okay, so no questions. Okay, inshallah. So we will next week, not next week, sorry, tomorrow. We'll have our weekly tafsir, inshallah. I will post what ayah we're going to be starting from. I need to check. I think last week we finished, I forget where we finished off, but I know it was after the two parables that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions about munafiqun. So we will definitely start after that, inshallah. So jazakallah khairan for everyone who stopped by. And inshallah, tomorrow we'll conduct our tafsir. Barakallahu feek. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all the tawfiq to do that which pleases Him in this world and in the hereafter. Barakallahu feekum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.